Okay. First, I want to thank Elaine for inviting me to give this talk tonight, and I want to welcome everybody on the call. I know you're here because most likely you're dealing with alienation personally, or perhaps because someone you love is dealing with alienation. And I know that means that you're suffering directly or indirectly from the loss of a relationship with a loved one. I also want to welcome my colleagues and other professionals in the field who may also be on the call. So based on my discussions with Elaine, I focused on 3 topics tonight. So there'll be 3 big chunks of my talk. I want to discuss how to tell if a child is alienated. Then I want to talk just a little bit about different kinds of cutoffs that can occur specifically for grandparents. And then I want to talk about some steps that you can take if you are cut off from an adult child. I hope that the information is useful and that this time we spend together tonight has meaning and value to you. I know that it does for me. So the first part I want to talk about is how to tell if a child who's rejecting a parent is in fact alienated. So when a child rejects a parent, there are usually 2 competing narratives about what's going on. For the favored parent, the narrative is something like this. Hey, I had nothing to do with this. That other parent is abusive, neglectful, incompetent, and all of this is his or her own doing. The child is rationally rejecting this child. They have a good reason for doing it. It's not my problem, and I shouldn't have to be involved in trying to fix it. Of course, the rejected parent has a completely different narrative, which goes something like this. I was a good and loving parent. I did nothing terribly wrong. The other parent has undermined me and interfered in my relationship with the kids, who now suddenly act as if I'm the worst person in the world and want nothing to do with me. My heart is broken, and my life has been torn apart. The legal professionals hired by each side enthusiastically line up behind these competing narratives, as do the friends and family of the 2 parents, usually. Now, many mental health professionals involved with the family will come along and try to find a middle space between these 2 competing narratives. Many, not all, but many mental health professionals conclude that either it's not possible to know what really happened, it's a he said, she said situation, or that they claim that the case is a hybrid. Yes, the favored parent engaged in undermining and interfering, but the rejected parents also made various parenting blunders that resulted in the children's valid feelings being hurt and their feelings of anger. So there are some mental health professionals who actually believe that most, if not all, cases of a child rejecting a parent are hybrids, a mix of alienation and justified rejection. It's my belief and experience that mental health professionals feel comfortable concluding that a case is a hybrid. Again, hybrid being a mix of it's the favored parent's fault and it's the rejected parent's fault. Because then there can be no accusation of bias or favoritism. I actually once heard a mediator say that he knows he succeeded with the case when at the end of his work, both parents walked away mad at him. In his mind, if both parents are angry, then he did a good job because he didn't side with one over the other. I think another reason that some mental health professionals prefer the hybrid model is that the solution is less dramatic than if alienation is found. When it's a hybrid, then generally the recommendation is just to let the situation play out. Why force the kids into a parental alienation immersion program if the rejected parent played a role in his or her rejection? If it's a middle-of-the-road problem, then there will be a middle-of-the-road solution, such as in-the-office reunification therapy. And because judges, many but not all, are generally risk-averse, a middle-of-the-road solution will please the judge, and the mental health professional is likely to be appointed by the court next time. I also think that the hybrid framework is consistent with some cognitive biases we have. Thank you, Steve Miller, for this. In that, we may think, it takes 2 to tango, or there's 2 sides to every story. And so these ideas of fairness and balance get misused by decision makers in family court to support the idea that both parents caused the problem, and therefore the status quo can be retained. That way no one has to do something that seems risky. This preference for seemingly safe, albeit ineffective treatment is part of the reason so many alienated kids stay alienated into adulthood. And how to reach out to an adult alienated child is one of the topics I'll be covering later in my talk tonight. But first, I want to present to you the 5-factor model for how to tell if a child is alienated or not. As noted a moment ago, many people throw up their hands and say it's not possible to really know if a child who's rejecting a parent is alienated. But that's actually not true. There is a model, and the model says that if and only if the 5 factors are present, can it be concluded that a child is alienated. The model itself has elements that are either de facto true, in other words, it can't be alienation if this is true because it's essential for the concept of alienation, or the factors have been supported by research, and I'll touch on that as we go. So I'm going to present the 5-factor model. I want to be clear, this model shouldn't replace clinical judgment, and there might be situations where clinical judgment is slightly different than this model, but this is the general model. So there's 5 factors, all need to be present in order to say that a child who's rejecting a parent is alienated. The first factor is that the child is in some kind of rejection resistance mode with the parent. This is the prerequisite to even proceed through the other factors. This is the trigger to the question, is it alienation? And the trigger is that the child is not receptive to the relationship. The child is either refusing to come to parenting time or is coming for parenting time but is shut down emotionally in his or her bedroom the whole time, won't speak with the rejected parent, and so forth. So you might have heard about the 4-factor model, and now you might be confused that I'm talking about the 5-factor model. It's really the same thing. In the original 4-factor model, this first factor that I just described, that there was a breach in the relationship, was just the prerequisite, not an actual factor. So I just want to be clear, the 4-factor model and the 5-factor model are only different in that the 4-factor model, there was a prerequisite, and in the 5-factor model, this prerequisite is now called factor 1. The rest is exactly the same. So the second factor in the 5-factor model is that there was a prior positive relationship between the child and the parent whom the child is now rejecting. This factor establishes that there is a breach in a once existing relationship. This is integral to the definition of parental alienation. It also means that whatever the flaws are of the parent, which are now being offered as reasons for the rejection, it means that these flaws didn't interfere with the relationship in the past because there was, in fact, a prior positive relationship. The third factor in the 5-factor model is that the rejected parent did not engage in the types of abusive or neglectful behavior that would warrant hatred and rejection by the child. If the rejected parent abused or neglected the child, we could not say that that child is alienated, because alienation by definition is unjustified rejection of a parent. So factor 3 involves ruling out a legitimate reason for the child's rejection. It's important to note that in general, abusive and neglectful parents do not actually elicit rejection and hatred in their children. And I'll talk about more on this in a moment. But alienation is defined as unjustified rejection. So if an abused child did reject a parent, we would not say that the child is alienated. It's important that parental alienation theory is not used as a cover for maltreating parents. Therefore, it's essential that any parental alienation consideration rule out whether the rejected parent engaged in behaviors that would warrant a child's rejection. So if a child abuse determination has been made, parental alienation should not be put forth as the explanation for the child's rejection. So it is relevant to ask at this point, what is child abuse? So I just want to go into this a little bit. According to the federal law, which is called the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, it's referred to as CAPTA, and it was passed most recently in 2010, but originally back in 1974, child abuse and neglect means, at a minimum, any recent act or failure to act on the part of a parent which results in death, serious physical or emotional harm, sexual abuse or exploitation, or an act or failure to act which presents an imminent risk of serious harm. And you can just Google CAPTA and you will find it. Child abuse and neglect are referred to as child maltreatment, and this includes all forms of violence against children. However, it's important to note that there's actually no consistent legal definition of each of the specific types of child maltreatment: physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, psychological maltreatment, across state child abuse statutes. Every state defines child maltreatment and the subtypes differently. These are generally found in one or more of each state's civil or criminal statutes. So you might want to Google or find your state's specific child abuse statutes and see how the various types of child maltreatment are defined. Generally, physical abuse refers to caregiver acts that cause harm to the child's body or are likely to cause harm. Sexual abuse generally refers to sexual contact or sexual behavior between the parent and child. And psychological maltreatment generally refers to behaviors that cause emotional or mental harm inflicted on the child. But to know what it is in your state, you'll have to search for that online, and you can find it. So as I mentioned a moment ago, children generally do not reject their parents, even grossly inadequate or maltreating parents. Regardless of the quality of the parent-child relationship, children are biologically hardwired, that means it's in our DNA, to form and maintain an attachment relationship with their parents. That attachment bond serves to protect the child from predators and other dangers and generally works to ensure the survival of the species. This attachment mechanism is so fundamental to the human condition that it exists regardless of the quality of the specific parent-child relationship. Even abused and neglected children form and maintain attachments with their abusive caregivers. And there's a lot of research and theory and clinical observations that support this. But if a child did reject an abusive caregiver, we would not say that the child is alienated. To be clear, I'm not talking about allegations of abuse, but actual findings of abuse made by the child protection system or some other neutral, credible source. So to recap, factor 3 is present if there's an absence of abuse or neglect on the part of the now rejected parent. The fourth factor in the 5-factor model is that the favored parent has been found to engage in the very behaviors that research shows can foster a child's unjustified rejection of the other parent. To be clear, there has to be evidence of this, not an inference that it's happening based on how the children are behaving. Many times parents call me and say, "My ex is turning my kids against me." And I will ask them, "Well, how do you know?" And the parent will respond, "Well, why else would my kids be acting the way they are?" So this is actually an inference. It's not evidence. And such an inference would not convince an evaluator or a judge that the favored parent has in fact engaged in alienating behaviors. So it's important to ask yourself, what exactly is it that you believe the other parent is doing, and what is your evidence that he or she is actually doing it? To help you answer this question and determine if factor 4 is present, you can consider the 17 primary parental alienation behaviors that can be used by a parent to foster a child's unjustified rejection of the other parent. These 17 behaviors have been identified through in-depth research-based interviews and surveys of rejected parents, and now also people who have lived through this, adults who were alienated as kids. They have also been interviewed, who reported that the favored parent was trying to turn their children against them. So these 17 behaviors have now been validated in a series of research studies, and the results have been published in numerous articles in peer-reviewed journals. It's important to note that research on the use of the parental alienation behaviors does not show that all 17 have to be present in order for a parent to alienate a child. What matters is how extensively and effectively the favored parent has used these behaviors. That is, a parent could unduly influence a child to unjustifiably reject the other parent by using a handful of these behaviors frequently, with great intensity, and with great conviction. It's not the number per se that is the most important feature of children's exposure to alienation behaviors. Taken together, these 17 parental alienation behaviors create psychological distance between the child and the rejected parent, such that the relationship becomes conflict-ridden and eventually non-existent as the children are empowered, if not pressured, to cut that parent off completely. Each of these behaviors serves to further the children's cohesion and alignment with the favored parent, creates psychological distance between the child and the rejected parent, intensifies the rejected parent's anger and hurt over the children's behavior, and incites conflict between the children and the rejected parent. Now I'm going to walk you through each of the 17 behaviors. The first is bad-mouthing. This involves speaking ill of the other parent to the children or within their earshot. It refers to a consistent pattern of negativity that is not balanced by positive statements. Even characteristics which are not inherently negative are depicted as problematic and worthy of concern, if not outright contempt. Favored parents make these statements with conviction and believability, and children exposed to these statements tend to believe them. When the content of the negative messages about the other parent is examined, it can be concluded that the underlying message, regardless of the specifics, the underlying message conveyed to the child is that the other parent is unsafe, unloving, and unavailable. This message represents the opposite of what a good parent is: safe, loving, and available. So the child who's exposed to this parental alienation behavior is receiving the message not just that there's something imperfect or less than ideal about that other parent, but rather that everything about that parent is bad and of no value to the child, and this paves the way for the child to relinquish that relationship. Because all parents are imperfect, it's highly likely that the targeted, rejected parent will have character flaws and will have engaged in behaviors that frustrate, hurt, disappoint, or anger the child. This means that the favored parent will have actual events to point to when engaging in bad-mouthing. And this means that the child will believe the favored parent because the events that that parent is talking about actually occurred. The favored parent does not need to fabricate flaws out of whole cloth, but rather find the seeds of discontent already there within the child and build on the child's own actual hurt and anger. This is partly why alienated children resist the idea that they are being brainwashed, because the events actually happened and because the child's feelings of hurt and anger are at least in part authentic. Children generally rely on their parents to help them make sense of the world because they don't have enough life experience to provide the necessary context for themselves. And much of human interactions can be viewed from multiple perspectives. A parent who is a vegan can be viewed as a wacky extremist or providing a role model for a very healthy lifestyle. A parent who helps the child with homework can be viewed as interfering and coddling or as nurturing and educational. A parent who calls the child can be viewed as harassing or as attentive. A parent who doesn't call could be seen as giving the child space or viewed as abandoning the child. It's really quite easy for a parent who's inclined to do so to find something to complain about with respect to the other parent. The second parental alienation behavior is limiting contact. This behavior works in concert with the bad-mouthing. First, the child's exposed to a steady stream of negative messages about the disfavored parent, and then the child is incrementally cut off from that parent. There are numerous ways to interfere with contact between parent and child, including not producing the child during scheduled parenting time. Sorry, Johnny's sick, he has homework, whatever, he's not coming today. Scheduling competing activities, not returning the child on time, coming early for pickups or late for drop-offs, and so forth. The result of this is that the rejected parent has fewer opportunities to counter the bad-mouthing and show the child that she's not unloving, unsafe, and unavailable. And the child becomes accustomed to spending increasingly less time with that parent. The child's life becomes more centered around the favored parent, and time with the other parent becomes an intrusion and interference into the regular course of life. The favored parent acclimates the child to increasingly longer separations from the other parent, such that eventually spending time with that parent becomes anomalous. The breaks in contact also provide fertile ground for the favored parent to instill fear in the child, as it's easier to become afraid of the unknown and the unfamiliar. The other thing I want to say about this second parental alienation behavior is that children live in the moment. They have many highs and lows over the course of the day. They're thrilled to get an invitation to a birthday party, and then they're despondent if they have to eat their broccoli. So much of parenting is being in the moment with the child to share these ups and downs. They form the basis of many childhood memories, and the parent who's spending time with the child has more opportunities to share in these emotional moments. In addition, the parent who's present can help the child make sense of the world. An alienating parent can encourage a child to cut off a friend who's momentarily hurt the child's feelings, whereas a targeted parent might be more inclined to help the child resolve the conflict. So limiting contact doesn't just interrupt the relationship, it limits the influence and importance of that relationship to the child. Number 3 is interfering with communication. Most children and parents communicate during separations, and this is especially true for divorced families in which parents and children experience routine separations from each other. Communication can take the form of letters and cards, telephone calls, emails, instant messages, text messages, Snapchats, etc. In general, favorite parents expect to have ease of access and ongoing communication with the children when they're with the other parent, but are much less receptive to that parent's attempts to communicate with the children when the children are with the favorite parent. Rejected parents often complain about being hung up on when calling or not being provided with the children's cell phone numbers, having letters and cards thrown out, being blocked on various social media sites, and generally being cut off from the children when they're with the favored parent. The purpose of this is to limit the amount of contact and the opportunities for the children and rejected parent to connect and interact. The rejected parent becomes less and less important to the child as there are fewer opportunities to share the small moments of life together. In addition, favorite parents can then point out to the children the lack of interest on the part of the rejected parent who can't even be bothered to call or write. This accusation, although false, can be quite believable to children as it reinforces the bad-mouthing message that the other parent is unloving and unavailable. The 4th parental alienation strategy is limiting mention and photographs of the rejected parent, what I refer to as interfering with symbolic communication. Before I explain what this is, I want to ask you to do something. And I know we can't see each other, and I can't see you, you can't see me, and you can't see each other, but I'm going to ask you to do something anyway. Raise your hand, okay, if something is true, okay? Raise your hand if you have a photo of your loved ones on your cell phone, possibly as a screensaver. Now, with that hand already up in the air, raise your other hand if you looked at the photo of a loved one in the last 24 hours. I imagine if I could see you, many of you would have both hands up. Now, keep your hands raised only if you looked at a picture of a loved one because you forgot what that person looked like. I suspect that there were a few hands up now, right? We don't look at photos of our loved ones to remember. We don't say, what's that husband of mine look like? Oh, right, okay, now I remember. Brown hair, brown eyes, right, beard, got it. Now, that's not why we look at pictures. Why do we do it then? I invite you to think for a moment about what happens in your heart when you look at a photo of a loved one. And I imagine that words such as warm, loving, loved come to mind, as well as safe and connected. Now, I know that for those of you who look at photos of your alienated child or grandchild, there are other words that also come to mind, such as loss and sadness. But the point I want to make now is that most of us feel connected to someone when we look at their picture. And this is especially true for children separated from a parent. Research has shown that in order to preserve a relationship during separations, children need symbolic communication with the absent parent. This means that they need to think about that parent, look at photographs of that parent, and talk about that parent. All of these activities keep the memories and the emotional connection alive. In the absence of these opportunities, children's feelings about that parent can become attenuated, lessened. Examples of this parental alienation strategy of interfering with symbolic communication include rearranging photo albums to eliminate or drastically minimize the presence of the other parent, and by doing so, actually rewriting history to create the appearance that that other parent was not ever really a significant part of the family. This creates a new understanding of the past in which the children come to minimize the presence of the rejected parent, and it's designed to actually change how the children feel about that parent moving forward. Another example of interfering in symbolic communication is discouraging or forbidding the child from keeping objects that were given to the child by that other parent, or perhaps even his or her friends and family. Gifts from the rejected parent and clothes or objects that originated from that parent are treated as if they're contaminated or contemptible and are removed from the child by the favored parent. Another example includes conveying to the children that talking about that parent is not welcome. In these ways, the symbolic connection between the child and the rejected parent is disrupted. Number 5 is withholding love and approval from the child when the child is affectionate or interested in the other parent. Favored parents alternate between intense exhibitions of affection and approval with intermittent, periodic rejection and withdrawal of love. This creates in the child a feeling of disequilibrium, of panic, and they become overwhelmed with the anxiety and a desire to win back the favored parent's affection and approval. Because it is when the children express positive regard or interest to be with or to talk about the rejected parent, that's when the favored parent is most likely to become distant and emotionally cool towards the children. In that moment of heightened vulnerability, the children are more likely to relinquish the relationship with the rejected parent in order to win back the love of the favored parent. Number 6 is telling the children that the rejected parent does not love them. This is a specific form of bad-mouthing and warrants special attention because it's so damaging to the children's relationship with that parent. Using this behavior, favored parents are able to convince their children that the other parent didn't want them to be born, didn't want to be their parents, and did not ever truly love them. Favored parents tell their children that the other parent does not love anyone but him or herself and abandoned the family. They encourage the children to conflate the end of the marriage with the end of the parent-child relationship by making statements such as, "Daddy left us," or "If Mom really loved us, she wouldn't have wanted a divorce." Thus, even if children wanted a relationship with that parent, they come to believe that that parent doesn't want a relationship with them, and this further drives a wedge between the parent and child. Number 7 is allowing or forcing the child to choose. Alienated children are often placed in the position of having to choose between their parents. The favored parent may offer them an opportunity to do something desirable, but only if they forego parenting time. Or the parent may literally stand in such a way as to force the child to choose which parent to approach, to sit next to, or be near. Some parents accomplish this through inducing guilt or shame in children when they express interest in being near or spending time with the other parent. And children subjected to pressure to choose will likely side with the favored parent, causing pain and humiliation to the other parent, perhaps leading that parent to give up or become hurt and angry. When the rejected parent becomes depressed and passive or reactive and angry, that furthers the aim of the alienation because the relationship between the child and the rejected parent becomes more conflict-ridden and negative. At some point, children will on their own resist spending time with a parent who is generally perceived to be angry or depressed. Thus, the rejected parent unwittingly contributes to the ruin of the relationship through the provocation of the favored parent and the children. Moreover, regardless of the response of the rejected parent, when children consistently choose one parent over the other, it empowers them to be cruel and may lead to further denigration of the parent in their mind in order to justify their choice. That is, they can say to themselves, "I'm not such a bad kid for treating my mother or father so badly. That parent really is no good and doesn't deserve my love anyway, so my behavior makes sense and is acceptable." In this way, children contribute to the denigration and rejection of that parent. Number 8 is creating the impression that the rejected parent is dangerous. This is yet another specific form of bad-mouthing and involves the favored parent conveying to the children information that is designed to make them believe that the other parent is dangerous and capable of inflicting harm. This may involve actions such as calling to check in with the children with a worried expression or tone of voice, or repeated questions about having enough to eat and feeling comfortable, or even asking the child, "Do you feel safe?" It may also include stories about past or future harm. Later, the children may come to realize that these stories were most likely not true, but in the immediate aftermath of hearing them, they may in fact incorrectly believe that the rejected parent is unsafe. Sometimes the story suggests that the parent is planning to kidnap them. Other times the stories that the parent has hurt them in the past, thereby planting a false memory. Favored mothers tend to create the impression that the father has anger problems and is likely to be aggressive, exploiting the power and assertiveness of males, while favored fathers tend to try to create the impression that the mother is mentally unstable or crazy and can harm the children in that way, exploiting the woman's emotional nature. Of course, in this time of the pandemic, parents can make it seem as if the other parent is somehow creating a heightened risk of the children being harmed in that way. The ninth parental alienation behavior is confiding in the children. When favored parents share with children personal and confidential information about the marital relationship, this can evoke pity in the children for the favored parent and disgust or anger towards the rejected parent. The content of the confidences tend to involve ways in which the favored parent has come to be disappointed in or hurt by the other parent. So the favored parent casts themselves as the victim and the other parent is the villain. This can be a particularly powerful behavior as it simultaneously serves to cement the children to the favored parent through pity and a desire to protect that parent and distance them from the other parent who is seen as bad. Another form of confiding involves sharing with the child information about the ongoing legal disputes with the other parent and encouraging the children to be angry at that other parent. I've seen cases where the children are so involved that they basically function as legal representatives of the favored parent, hotly negotiating the finer points of legal disputes with the rejected parent and threatening them that they better take the deal or else. As we know, children can be easily misled to think that the favored parent has the moral high ground and the other parent is being greedy or villainous in their legal disputes. The 10th behavior is forcing the children to reject the parent. Alienated children are often placed in the situation of having to actively reject, not just choose to be with the favored parent, but actively rejecting that parent. Favored parents create opportunities in which the children, again, not only choose the favored parent, but are the ones to inform the rejected parent that the favored parent is the victor in the current conflict, whatever that is. Alienated children have been instructed to ignore the rejected parent at sports events and other public places, encouraged to send letters to the rejected parent, informing that parent that he or she is no longer wanted. The children are coached to refuse to get in the car or go to that parent's home. They're told to disinvite that parent to various social events and activities, and in many other ways reject, snub, rebuff, scorn, and ignore them. These actions serve two functions. The first is to hurt the parent's feelings and frustrate that parent and perhaps cause that parent to become angry at the children or to give up trying to have a relationship with them. Second, these behaviors create cognitive dissonance in the children, which creates a need in the children to justify their cruel actions and hence entrenches the rejection and dislike for that parent. Cognitive dissonance occurs when one's actions are not consistent with one's beliefs. To act in a way, being hurtful to a parent, that runs counter to one's belief, I'm a good child, evokes cognitive dissonance and psychological tension. The remedy is to modify one's beliefs to be in alignment with one's actions. Thus, children who believe that they are essentially good do not want to think that their rejection of the parent constitutes being cruel. The solution is to modify the meaning of the behavior so that the rejection of the parent is not cruel because that parent deserves to be rejected. So to avoid cognitive dissonance that would result from rejecting a good parent, children will revise their beliefs about the rejected parent in order to realign and explain their own behavior. So when a parent creates a situation in which the child is forced to reject the other parent, this sets off an internal process within the child that fosters the child's negative views of the parent who's being rejected. Number 11 is asking the children to spy on the other parent. Oftentimes, in conflicted custody and divorce situations, one parent would like to have access to information about the other parent. Examples of desired information include whether or not a parent received a pay raise or bonus, whether the parent has a new significant other, and whether the parent is planning new legal action. This information could satisfy curiosity or might even be useful as leverage in legal disputes. Of course, divorced parents may not be obligated to share this information with each other, but the children might be aware of or could obtain the information if asked to do so because they're in that home. By asking the children to secretly obtain this information, the favored parent is able to create a psychological wedge between the child and the other parent. Once children have spied on a parent, they know that a betrayal has been committed. In other words, to reduce the guilt that could accompany such a behavior, the children might want to avoid that parent who's been spied on. They know that they have done something wrong and can avoid feeling guilty about it by avoiding the parent or justifying the bad behavior by saying that the rejected parent is bad and therefore deserves to be betrayed. Number 12 is asking the child to keep secrets from the other parent. Favored parents can create situations in which the child feels compelled to keep a secret from the other parent. Examples include telling them that the favored parent will take them on a special vacation or purchase a coveted object, but the other parent must not be told because he or she is likely to object and spoil the plan. Thus, the children's own self-interest comes into play because they want the plan to come to fruition, so they willingly keep the secret. However, keeping the secret furthers the sense of psychological distance between the child and the other parent. And of course, that parent is likely to become hurt and angry at the child once they find out that the child has kept a secret from them. Number 13 is referring to the rejected parent by his or her first name. Unless this is a practice instituted by the rejected parent, him or herself, referring to the rejected parent by his or her first name upon separation or divorce signals to the children that the favored parent does not respect that other parent, doesn't want the child to respect that parent, does not value that person's parental role or authority, and in every way no longer considers that person to be an important person in the life of the child. Encouraging children refer to a parent by his or her first name gives them permission to devalue that person and to disregard that person's parental role and authority. Referring to the parent by his or her first name is a way of demoting that parent from an important person with a unique and specific relationship to the child, mom or dad, to just another person whom the child refers to by his or her first name. Number 14 is referring to a step-parent as mom or dad and encouraging the children to do the same, or in some other way installing a replacement parent figure. This action provides further evidence that the purpose of referring to the rejected parent by his or her first name is to pave the way for the step-parent to be the only one referred to by the label mother or father. Again, this is not a small thing, merely semantics that should be ignored. When this happens, the favored parent is well on his or her way to completely removing the other parent from the children's lives. Referring to the step-parent as mother or father signifies that this new person will be replacing the rejected parent. The children learn from this action that they must choose between the rejected parent and the step-parent and are not allowed to love both. A variation of this that I have seen is to elevate some other person in the child's life to replace the rejected parent. This could be a grandparent, or in one case, an actual team of people became designated the dad team to replace dad. Eventually, the children claim that this replacement person or team is all he or she needs and there's no purpose of the rejected parent. Number 15 is withholding medical, social, academic, or other relevant information from the rejected parent and keeping that parent's name off of such records. Rejected parents routinely complain that they're not properly informed about medical visits and procedures, social activities, and athletic and academic events and other opportunities to be involved in their children's lives. In light of the favored parent's efforts to erase the rejected parent from the children's lives, the favored parent certainly doesn't want that person showing up and making an appearance, as that would spoil the narrative that she's trying to create, that the other parent doesn't care about the children. In addition, if a parent misses an opportunity to be involved, that can be pointed out to the children as proof that the other parent doesn't care. And that reinforces the bad-mouthing message. Should the children mention this lapse to the rejected parent, like, hey, how come you weren't at my hockey game the other day? It puts that parent in a very difficult position. Either they're going Either they're going to explain to the child, hey, that other parent didn't tell me, and they don't want to do that because then it looks like they're engaging in alienation or counter-alienation, and they want to take the high road. This is what many parents say. So they won't reveal that the favorite parent didn't share the necessary information that would allow them to participate. Many rejected parents also believe that should they blame the favorite parent, the children will not be satisfied with that and will conclude that if the parent really cared, they would have been there. Furthermore, by missing these important events, the rejected parent's opportunity to have influence over and exercise his or her parental authority and share in these emotional moments with the child are all diminished. So they have fewer opportunities to experience these special moments and build a memory. The children come to conclude that the favorite parent is, in fact, the only real parent who cares. Number 16 is changing the children's name to remove the association with the rejected parent. Favorite parents often find a way to refer to the children and have the children refer to themselves with a different name than the one that the parents have called them since birth. Favored mothers may do this by using their maiden name or the stepfather's last name rather than the father's last name. Favored fathers can employ this behavior as well by creating a new nickname for the children or by using just the father's portion of a hyphenated last name. Changing a person's name is a way of staking a claim on that person, claiming ownership. Thus, the favorite parent using this behavior employs a powerful and effective mechanism for aligning the child with him or her at the exclusion of their relationship with the other parent. Needless to say, when the rejected parent hears the children use a new name that purposefully excludes him or her, they will feel hurt and angry and may react in a way that reinforces the bad-mouthing message that they are unsafe, unloving, and unavailable. And finally, number 17. This is undermining the authority of the rejected parent. Alienated children often speak of the favorite parent as if that parent were perfect, exceptional, and in every way above reproach. They behave as if they are dependent on that parent in a way that is not necessary or appropriate given their age and life experience, and this is not an accident. This hero worship and dependency is fostered and cultivated by the favored parent. Favored parents are able to develop dependency in their children, rather than, as is typical of non-favored parents, help their children develop self-sufficiency, critical thinking skills, autonomy, and independence. Favored parents do not behave as if they want their children to grow up to live independent lives. Favored parents encourage their children to believe that they need the favored parent's approval at all costs, even more than they need to think, feel, and decide things for themselves. In this way, favored parents maintain control over the child and ensure that the child will comply with the plan to eliminate the other parent. An important component of this behavior is undermining the authority of the rejected parent to ensure that the children have an allegiance to only one parent. Examples of undermining the authority of the other parent include making up rules and regulations for the children's behavior, even when they're with the other parent, demeaning the rules and regulations of the other parent to the children, and overriding the other parent's rules and regulations. In sum, and I know this was a long slog, in sum, these are the 17 parental alienation behaviors that can foster a child's unjustified rejection of the other parent and constitute the fourth factor in the five-factor model. These behaviors must be identified independently, not inferred based on the behavior of the children. The fifth factor in the five-factor model is that the children exhibit the 8 behaviors that are unique to alienated children and not even exhibited by children towards a parent who actually maltreated them. The first is called the campaign of denigration. The first sign that children have been unduly influenced to become alienated from one parent by the other parent is that they become uncooperative, distrustful, and even hateful towards that rejected parent. Parents who were once loved and valued sometimes overnight become objects of disdain and mistrust and supposed fear. This sometimes happens so quickly that the parent cannot believe that their loving children have turned into hateful and spiteful people who refuse to so much as share a meal. So we can think of this first of the 8 behaviors, as the campaign of denigration, as having elements relevant to the past, the present, and the future. With respect to the past, the children behave as if there was never a meaningful relationship and as if they had no history of positive experiences. If alienated children are shown a video or photograph depicting them engaging in affectionate and positive interactions with the now rejected parent, they are likely to claim to have been pretending or that they were forced to smile and that their pleasure and warmth and affection was not genuine. It's really difficult for them to admit that they once had a positive experience and good feelings for that parent who is now rejected. So that's the past. With respect to the present, as noted a moment ago, these children are very negative about and act very negatively towards the rejected parent. They can behave in a rude, entitled, arrogant, and quite cold, heartless manner. And with respect to the future, they claim to have no investment in an improved relationship. They say that they cannot imagine anything that would make them feel differently about the rejected parent. They often claim to have already given that parent too many chances, and they have no interest in trying to repair the relationship. Not only do alienated children profess to hate the disabled parent, the rejected parent, but they appear willing to share their views widely without experiencing any shame or discomfort. That's the campaign element in the campaign of denigration, the willingness to gleefully broadcast just how terrible that parent is. Children do not typically reject and antagonize a parent, even a really bad one, unless they've been poisoned against that parent. It's simply outside their frame of reference to do so, and well outside the comfort zone of most children. Decades of attachment research reveals that when children are harmed, they experience insecurity, fear, and uncertainty, which automatically leads to seeking reassurance from and proximity to the caretaker, even if that caretaker is the one inducing the pain, fear, or anxiety. In addition, children may worry that if it's possible for them to throw away a parent, perhaps a parent could throw them away, and that is a very disquieting thought. This is what makes parental alienation so distinctive, that a child will exhibit utter and complete rejection of the parent. It's not as if the child is saying that he or she prefers one parent over the other and would like to spend more time with one parent and a little less time with the other parent. In cases of parental alienation, the children state that they despise one parent, never love that parent, will never love that parent, want absolutely nothing to do with that parent, and cannot imagine ever wanting anything to do with that parent ever again. The children, as a result of the constant bad-mouthing and the other parental alienation behaviors described above, come to view that parent as practically non-human and someone who must be discarded once and for all. Accordingly, alienated children do not typically manifest a sense of loss of the relationship. In contrast, children who have been abused are typically quite reluctant to reveal that they have been abused, and they're reluctant to admit it, that it was a parent who harmed them. Moreover, once they admit the abuse, they are still typically reluctant to reject that parent. There is usually no denigration or antagonism, and there's no public campaign. Typically, abused children want to maintain a relationship even with an abusive parent, even one who has committed gross acts of physical and sexual and psychological maltreatment. They hold out the hope for improvement and want to continue to try to give that parent a chance. Most abused children will even assume the blame for the abuse themselves, for example, by saying the parent hit them because they were bad and deserved it, and they will plead to be reunited with the abusive parent. Alienated children also differentiate themselves from actually abused children by erasing or denying anything positive about the relationship with the rejected parent. That is, actually abused kids can still admit that they had good times and had positive experiences with the parent who abused them, whereas alienated kids cannot. The second child manifestation is called weak, frivolous, and absurd reasons for the rejection. If alienated children are asked to provide the reason for their hatred and condemnation of the rejected parent, they will offer explanations that are simply not severe enough to lead a child to hate a parent, such as slurping soup or serving spicy food, patently absurd, like you locked me in the closet for 3 weeks and starved me, or frivolous, complaining about the clothes and hairdo of that parent. One 3-year-old boy explained that he no longer wanted anything to do with his father because the father wouldn't put him down for a nap on the couch. One 17-year-old boy stroked his chin thoughtfully when asked by the custody evaluator why he didn't want to spend any time with his mother, and he said after a moment, it's an intangible. But he couldn't even be bothered to come up with a reason. Children who have actually been maltreated have good reasons for creating distance from the abusive parent, and when prodded to reveal them, will do so in a credible manner. And to be clear, if abuse has actually occurred, then it would not be a weak, frivolous, or absurd reason for the children to reject that parent, and this is why it's so important to rule out abuse or neglect as part of factor 3. The third behavior is lack of ambivalence about the favored parent. Most children have mixed feelings about their parents. Even the best of parents is imperfect or set limits that cause resentment and frustration in children. A hallmark of parental alienation, however, is that children indicate an absence of ambivalence. The favored parent is idealized and the other parent is demonized. One parent becomes all good while the other is all bad. Even much older kids who typically express mixed feelings about all sorts of people in their lives, such as teachers and friends and coaches, claim to have no mixed feelings for either parent. As one alienated child proudly proclaimed, "I love my father to death." These children express an unhealthy and unrealistic hero worship for one parent and utter contempt for the other. By contrast, children who have been abused typically do not express blanket condemnation even for the abusive parent and are able to express the normal range of thoughts and feelings and see the good and bad in both parents. The fourth child behavior is absence of guilt about the treatment of the rejected parent. Alienated children generally treat the rejected parent very poorly, but appear to have no qualms about their rude, hurtful, and cold behavior. Alienated children will make statements such as, "He doesn't deserve to see me," when discussing the rejection of the disfavored parent. Gratitude for gifts, favors, or financial support provided by the rejected parent and his or her family is generally non-existent. And again, this attitude stands in stark contrast to maltreated children who often experience and express guilt when setting limits on abusive parents, bending over backwards to see things from that parent's perspective rather than from their own need to protect themselves. Fifth is the presence of borrowed scenarios. Alienated children often make accusations about the rejected parent that utilize phrases and ideas borrowed from the favored parent. One clue that a statement is borrowed from a favored parent is children's use of language and ideas that they do not even seem to understand, such as making accusations that can't be supported with any details or using words that can't even be defined. This is what lends parental alienation its feel of programming. Children will adamantly claim things to be true when they do not even understand the words they're saying. Sixth is the independent thinker phenomenon. Alienated children will strongly profess that the decision to cut off one parent is theirs alone, regardless of the fact that it appears obvious to observers that they are being unduly influenced by the favored parent. So that's why it's called the independent thinker phenomenon, because children will adamantly claim to be thinking for themselves, to be thinking independently, that the negative feelings are wholly their own. These children deny that their feelings about the rejected parent are in any way influenced by the favored parent. Alienated children will invoke the concept of free will and speak with adult-like mannerisms and conviction that is not appropriate nor typical for their age or for the situation. Seventh is reflexive support for the favored parent in all interparental conflict. Following a divorce settlement, there's usually ample opportunity for parents to still disagree regarding the health, education, and well-being of the children, as well as about ongoing adjustments to the parenting time schedule. Generally, alienated children will assume that the favored parent is right in his or her claims without ever considering that the rejected parent has a legitimate point of view. There's no willingness or attempt to be impartial when faced with any interparental conflict. Alienated children have no interest in hearing the rejected parent's point of view and may make the case for the favored parent better than the parent does him or herself. Nothing the rejected parent could do or say would make any difference as their minds are made up. This is true even when the favored parent is making absurd claims that make no sense or violate the terms of the order and parenting plans. No matter how outlandish the requests or claims are, alienated children will generally state their support for the favored parent. And the eighth and final child behavior is called the spread of animosity. This final characteristic of alienated children is rejection of the extended family of the rejected parent. Not only is the rejected parent denigrated, despised, and avoided, but so too are his or her entire family. Formerly beloved grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins are suddenly avoided and rejected. This does not generally occur with children who have been abused. They do not generalize the difficulties with an abusive parent to that parent's entire extended family. In fact, child welfare policy in this country encourages placement of abused children with relatives, often the relatives of the abusive parents. Kinship foster care, that's what it's called. It's the fastest growing form of child welfare placement in this country because it's considered in keeping with children's wishes and needs to maintain family connections, and because it's considered to be in the best interest of the child. One caveat to this one caveat to this behavior of the child is when the rejected parent, him or herself, doesn't have a relationship with his own family. In those situations, the children, even if they're alienated, might maintain a contact and connection with those people. All right. Each of these 8 behaviors is unique and specific to alienated children. Even children who have been abused by a parent generally don't treat the parent the way that alienated children treat their non-abusive parents. In a recent survey of 338 mental health professionals who work with moderately and severely physically abused children, we found that these clinicians described their abused child clients as rarely exhibiting more than 4 of these behaviors at an extreme level, which is compared to alienated children who exhibit all of these behaviors at an extreme degree. So to recap, in order to know whether a child is alienated or not, all 5 factors have to be present. There has to have been a current rupture in the relationship. There has to have been a prior positive relationship. There has to be absence of maltreatment. There has to be evidence that the favored parent is engaged in many of the 17 primary parental alienation behaviors. And there has to be evidence that the children are exhibiting most of the 8 behavioral manifestations of alienation. It would be beyond the scope of this talk to discuss how to make the case in court that these 5 factors are present, but it can be done, and certainly if you're trying to sort out what happened or is currently happening in your relationship with your child, this is the framework that you can follow. As mentioned above, and by many other professionals on these calls, many parental alienation cases are mismanaged by the legal and mental health professionals interfacing with these families. A judge, a custody evaluator, or therapist may not believe that alienation is real. And they may believe that every time a child rejects a parent, that the rejected parent did something to deserve that response in the child. Some may believe that alienation is real, but fail to detect it in an actual case because they misunderstand the signs and symptoms. Or they may believe that it's real and even believe that it's occurring in the current case, but still mismanage it by failing to recommend or order the proper treatment. It's pretty well understood at this point that routine in-the-office reunification therapy is highly likely to fail. And this is true for many reasons that I won't elaborate on now, but I can share some new data from a study I just completed with my colleague, Colleen Murray, and a research assistant, and the data has now been published. We surveyed 120 licensed mental health professionals who advertise on their website as providing reunification therapy specifically for children of divorce. So we surveyed them, and what we learned is very troubling and does explain, at least in part, why this treatment is so fraught. For example, only 1/3 of the clinicians said it was very important to assess for alienation. Only 2/3 actually did this, but many did not. And they didn't have any specific tools that they were using to do it. Many did not develop and share their treatment goals with targeted parents. Many did not define success as resumption of parenting time. And 3/4 didn't even have joint sessions in all of their cases. Only 40% of the therapists said that parenting time was resumed in at least half of their cases. I mean, that is dismal. And yet very few said that they referred their case to more intensive treatments. I am personally familiar with many cases in which the targeted parent goes to court after in-the-office reunification therapy has failed, and the courts will just make a new order for the same treatment, sometimes with the same therapist, possibly with a different therapist, but the whole thing starts over again. So it's no wonder that many alienated kids turn 18 while still alienated. I know that for many parents it feels like a catastrophic event, or can feel like a catastrophic event, when the child turns 18 and is outside the purview of the courts. But in my experience, this is just the beginning of a new chapter. It is not the end of all hope. For one thing, once the child turns 18 and eventually goes to college, for those that do, there can be a first ever geographic separation between the child and the alienator, and this in and of itself can create an opportunity to reconnect. There is also maturational growth that occurs at this point in development. We now know the human brain isn't fully developed till 25, and this can result in the adult child developing a new perspective on the situation. I'm not going to go through all the catalysts that exist, but in my research with adult children of parental alienation, I identified 12 different catalysts to having the realization that maybe the rejected parent wasn't all bad after all, and maybe everything the favorite parent said wasn't always true. But many parents cut off from an adult child don't want to wait around for these catalysts to occur and for the child to spontaneously reconcile, although this does happen. So I've developed a method to help parents reach out to their adult child, and I'm going to go through that method tonight. But in my experience, just for the sake of transparency here, I do believe it's helpful to do this with a trained professional. I'm going to walk you through it tonight, but I do recommend you also, before you send the letter that I'm going to talk about, that you do work with a professional. It doesn't have to be me. In that, many times people call me and tell me that they followed my method, because this is also outlined. It's going to be a little bit different tonight, but it's somewhat outlined in one of my books, and I've discussed it in various workshops, and people call me and say they did it, and, oh, Amy, I tried your letter and it didn't work. And then I will ask them to show me what they did, and sometimes it's not really what I had in mind. I think part of the issue is that it's really hard work, and it helps to have someone in there with you sorting it out. But before I turn to what to do about the fact that you have an adult child from whom you are cut off, I want to briefly talk about the different family pathways that alienated grandparents may travel. So the first way to be cut off from your grandchildren is through being a targeted parent yourself. You're cut off from your adult alienated child who has children, and thereby you're cut off from the children of that person. Because of the alienation, the grandparent doesn't have access to the grandchildren. The grief that people in this situation feel is twofold. The first is from the long-standing cutoff from one's own children, who are now grown up and have children of their own, and the second is the subsequent cutoff from the grandchildren. Many grandparents in this situation have never met their grandchildren and feel a tremendous sense of frustration and loss of the coveted role of grandparent. The second way to be an alienated grandparent is to have a good relationship with your adult child, but because that adult child has become a targeted parent in his or her own marriage, divorce relationship, that person then becomes cut off from his children. So you as the grandparents get cut off from your grandchildren as part of the spread of animosity that the children exhibit. That's the 8th behavioral manifestation, right? Spread of animosity towards the extended family. In general, grandparents in this situation have not been targeted parents themselves, so they don't have that loss to deal with, and their role as a parent has not been frustrated because they're not a targeted parent. However, if you're in this situation, you have to deal with the fact that your adult child is a targeted parent, and you may feel and be somewhat helpless to make an impact on that situation. In addition, many of these individuals have had the pleasure and joy of developing meaningful bonds with their grandchildren, only to have that bond disrupted once the adult child becomes a targeted parent. Thus, you have the wrenching loss of cutoff from a specific relationship with specific grandchildren, as opposed to the individuals in the first category who have the loss of what could have been. The third category of cut-off grandparents is people whose adult children have died, and subsequent to that, the other parent, the son-in-law or daughter-in-law, has made it difficult, if not impossible, for these grandparents to maintain contact with their grandchildren. People in this situation have to contend with the gut-wrenching loss of a child, which is obviously a terrible tragedy, compounded by the loss of the relationship with the grandchildren. And the fourth category, and this may be the most prevalent, is grandparents who are not targeted parents, have an okay relationship with their adult child, who grows up to marry somebody, who then manipulates the child to cut off the parent. So I was at a talk once, and I asked people, raise your hand if you think that your daughter-in-law or son-in-law has masterminded your child from cutting you off and thereby cutting you out of the grandchildren's lives, and most people raise their hand. Okay, so now I want to talk about what to do if you have an adult alienated child, outside of legal action, obviously. What you can do to try to heal a relationship with this child. And everything I'm going to say applies to grandparents as well, in terms of trying to heal the breach with either your adult child or with the son-in-law or daughter-in-law who you believe is creating the problem. I want you to close your eyes and take a few deep breaths. We are transitioning to a different kind of talk now. I invite you to imagine that you're standing on the bank of a turbulent river, and your adult child is on the other side of the river. And the river itself represents all of the hurt and anger that lies between the two of you. If you're like many other targeted parents, the actions that you've taken up until now represent you standing on your side of the river, calling out across the river to your child on the other side. And perhaps you've said things like, if you only knew my side of the story, you wouldn't be so hurt and angry with me. Or perhaps you've even said, I'm sorry for everything, anything I've done or you think I've done that might have been done that might have hurt you. And that hasn't worked yet, because in keeping with the metaphor of the river, it's like standing on your side of the riverbank, asking your child to come to your side and look at the relationship from your point of view. And that generally doesn't work. So what I want to describe to you is a method for writing a letter that, again, in keeping with the metaphor, involves building a bridge, walking across the bridge, standing on the riverbank next to your child, and looking at your relationship from your child's point of view. Now, many of you, upon hearing what I just said, will probably be thinking a few things. You might be thinking, why should I look at things from my child's point of view? Why should I apologize for something I didn't do? Or you might be thinking, I already tried that and it didn't work. Or you might be thinking, I'm the victim here. Why should I be chasing my child? And I'm going to try to answer each of these questions. First, at no point do I recommend apologizing for something that you did not do. I think that targeted parents get trapped sometimes in a binary thought process that says either you prove you didn't do something or you apologize for something you didn't do. But I firmly believe that there is a space that you can find that involves acknowledging your child's perspective without agreeing with it or arguing about the facts. And more about this in a moment. The second concern is that what I'm recommending has already been tried and failed, and that is possible. However, I can say, as I said a moment ago, many people told me over the years that they followed what I suggested, but when they show me their letters, it's not really what I'm talking about. And that's because I think this is very hard to do on your own. And this is something I do help in my coaching, but you can find other people to help you as well. So you may think you've tried what I'm recommending, but perhaps you haven't done it quite. The third concern is that it's unfair for the targeted parent or grandparent who's already been maligned and mistreated to have to do this really hard work of building the bridge. And to that I say, I absolutely agree. It is terribly unfair, and you certainly don't have to do it. But here are the reasons to do it, even though it is unfair. First, you're the parent, and parents generally have to make the greater effort in the parent-child relationship. Second, you're older, hopefully wiser, and you have more life experience, so it's fitting for you to be the one to do this work. And third, You are the person who's most in touch with the desire to repair the relationship. Of course, you can keep doing what you're doing, or you can decide to try something new. It is entirely your choice. I'm here to offer you a way to think about doing something new. You get to decide if this appeals to you. You may also be asking at this point whether it's been successful. And my answer to that is yes, many times, but certainly not always. I've had many successes over the years. I wouldn't be doing this otherwise. But it's not a magic wand. I wish I had a magic wand. It would be so much easier. So I want to be clear that this bridge we're talking about is forged from the love that you have from your child and the belief that your child still loves you, even if he or she cannot admit it right now. So another helpful image that I'm going to evoke now that I offer to you is that of the mother bunny in the beloved baby book, The Runaway Bunny. In this book, the baby bunny imagines various scenarios of running away. Perhaps he will join the circus, or perhaps he will become a crocus in a hidden garden, or a bird that flies away, or a sailboat that sails off. In response, the mother never gets her feelings hurt. She never gets angry. She always responds with a loving message. If you become a bird and fly away from me, I will be a tree that you come home to. If you become a crocus in a hidden garden, I will be a gardener and I will take care of you. If you go flying on a flying trapeze, I will be a tightrope walker and I will walk across the air to you. In the end, the bunny decides he will become a little boy and run into the house so his mother can catch him in his arms and hug him. I love this mother bunny because she never gets offended or insulted by her child's desire for separation and independence. She maintains a steady, positive image of her role in her child's life and is able to respond to his rejection in a loving and connected manner. Now, to be fair to you all, there doesn't seem to be another parent bunny undermining her, so it's a lot easier for her to stay compassionate and connected. But that is what is required of you, and I invite you to channel your inner mother bunny or father bunny when thinking about writing this letter. So the bridge is your effort to speak from your heart to your child's heart. It is not a demand or expectation for an apology. It is not a demand or expectation that the child sees the situation from your point of view. It is not a demand or expectation that the child views the other's parent the same way that you do. Nor is it a groveling and insincere contrition on your part for crimes not committed. I want to return for a moment to this idea of finding a space that neither demands that your child sees things from your point of view nor agrees with the child's false narrative. To make this point, I want to tell you about a client of mine who told me that when her son was 7 years old, she asked the father if she could move away with the boy to a new state because they would have a better life there. And so she wanted to move hundreds of miles away, and he said, yes, this is the story she told me. So she sold her house and quit her job and found a new house and a new job several states away. The day before she was set to leave, the father filed an emergency motion to prevent her from taking the boy. She lost at the temporary hearing, but she decided to move anyway so she would not lose her job and her home. She thought she would eventually win at the trial, but she didn't, and she was never the primary parent again. According to her, she eventually became alienated. By the time she came to me, she had already written letters to her son explaining that it was not her fault that she moved without him, that she had to do it. Because in doing so, she was asking him to look at the situation from her point of view, which required him to admit that he was wrong for being hurt and angry. And of course, this didn't work. So I helped her write a letter, which in part asked her son if he felt abandoned by her. Did he miss her? And were there times when he needed her to be there for him, but she wasn't? The point is that the bridge involves looking at the experience from the child's point of view and being interested in and empathic with the child's felt experience. By going into the child's pain, that's where the healing takes place. So before you write the letter, you need to do 3 pieces of homework. When I describe the homework, I'm going to use the scenario of a mother alienated from a daughter, but obviously you can make it work for you. It's just sometimes the pronouns trip me up. So it just makes it easier for me to explain with a consistent pronoun scenario. So the first piece of homework is to imagine that your daughter has made a new friend, and that friend says to her after a while, "Hey, I noticed you don't really mention your mom, and you don't take her calls or answer her texts. What's the deal?" I think you can imagine that the daughter would not say to this new friend, "Well, my father engaged in the 17 primary parental alienation strategies and fostered my unjustified rejection of my mother." Don't you just wish your adult alienated child would say that? But she won't say that, because if she had that awareness, most likely you would already have a relationship. She also will not say, "Well, I'm psychotic and my behavior has no relationship to reality." And nor will she say, "I don't know," or, "Well, my mother slurped her soup and therefore I cannot have anything to do with her ever again." The reason she will not say these things, most likely, is that as humans, we have a need to experience ourselves as rational beings who make thoughtful decisions. It's not likely that an adult child would admit to being brainwashed or to having no good reason for cutting a parent off. The adult child has an internally consistent, plausible explanation for her behavior. And the reason she does is because you, the targeted parent, are an imperfect person, and you have hurt your child, and you have frustrated her, and you have disappointed her. That just goes with the territory. Without the alienation, she wouldn't have cut you off because of those flaws. But you do have flaws, and there has been conflict in the relationship, and that is what she would share with the new friend who asked why she has cut you out of her life. So the first piece of homework is to write a list of grievances about the relationship from your adult child's point of view. This serves two purposes. First, it's an exercise in perspective taking. It's your first opportunity to cross that bridge and look at the relationship from your child's point of view. And the list you make will get incorporated into the letter that you will be writing. The list must be written from your child's point of view. So it should say things like, "I don't talk to my mother because she broke up the family, hurt my dad, stole my money, favored my brother, yelled at me, didn't trust me to make my own decisions," etc. Whatever you think it is. Remember, you don't have to agree with these points. You just have to write them down and begin to consider the relationship from your adult child's point of view. The second homework assignment is to think of an activity you engaged in with your child that was a very fun and positive experience, and an experience that has a positive aroma attached to the experience. I know that might sound odd. Examples might be baking brownies, going to a pizza parlor, hiking in nature, going to the ocean, horseback riding, giving the puppy a bath, having a campfire, playing with Play-Doh. You get the idea. Fun experience, positive, shared experience, and a pleasant smell. You don't have to write it up. You don't have to do anything. You just have to have that in mind when you sit down to write the letter. The third piece of homework involves finding a photograph of your child when she was 5 years of age. Not a photo of her loving on you. The point is not to show your child how much she loved you. You just want to find a great photo of her looking like her true best self. I do want to warn you that some people feel sad doing this preparation homework, since thinking about the grievances, looking at photos, and visiting memories can amplify your feelings of loss and grief. So be prepared and do it in a time when you will have the emotional space to process whatever feelings arise. Once the homework is done, you're ready to write the letter. And I'm now going to walk you through the elements. I will use as an example a father writing to a son, but it could be you writing to your daughter-in-law or writing to a daughter. I'm just using this as an example. So first you want to start with a loving greeting. It just can't be, "Hi, John," with a colon. That doesn't set the right tone. You want something like, "My dearest son," or "To my precious son." It has to sound like you, but you at your most loving. If you don't want your child to read the letter and from the very beginning feel, So you want to signal from the very first word that you're writing this letter from a place of love. In the first paragraph, you want to acknowledge that there's a breach in the relationship. You can say something like, I've been thinking a lot lately about the distance in our relationship. It's been such a long time since we've been close. Of course, if the breach is more recent, you wouldn't use the phrase such a long time. Then you want to tell your story about the first time you held your child. Of course, if you're a grandparent writing to a son-in-law, it might be the first time you met. I'm using the example of a father and son. You could say, when I held you in my arms for the first time and saw your little button nose and bright blue eyes, filled with curiosity and your darling sprouts of hair, I was filled with awe and love for you. I imagined a lifetime of love and closeness when I held you. Never in my wildest dreams could I have imagined that we would end up where we are today, with so much hurt and pain between us. You want to keep the focus on how much you love your child, how much love you felt for this beautiful, special person, and how you imagined a lifetime of love and closeness ahead of you. It's not a time to talk about your pain and suffering. In the second paragraph, you want to express a desire for a better relationship. You could say something like, you are my precious child, and I want nothing more than to have a better relationship with you. A relationship filled with love and laughter and a sense of safety and happiness and belonging. I have a vision of our relationship as one filled with love and laughter and sharing, in which you feel and know that I'm there for you in ways in which you would need and deserve me to be. Again, this is not a place to talk about your pain and suffering or what's been taken from you. It's just your desire for a better relationship. In the third paragraph, the intention is to share a vision for a better future. You might say, one thing I know and believe with all my heart is that sometimes parents and their adult children have conflict and distance, and usually they can find a way to work things out that feels right for everyone. More than anything, that's what I want for us. Notice that I did not say alienation. I used the word conflict and distance, and notice the use of the phrase a solution that feels right for everyone. This shows that you are seeking a mutually satisfying resolution, not that your child sees things your way. Then, still in paragraph 3, you can add a story from your personal life about two people who had a falling out and worked things out and are happy they did. But you don't want a lot of detail. You might say, you may not remember this or know this, but Uncle Joe and Grandpa didn't talk for quite a while after a falling out they had, and eventually they decided to patch things up, and they're both so glad they did. Notice that there's no real details here, and there's no blame. You're not saying, thankfully, Uncle Joe finally came around and realized what a jerk he was being. All right, the intention of the fourth paragraph is to show the child you're interested in his or her perspective. So you could say, I've been thinking a lot about our relationship from your point of view, and that will be true because that's what's happening with the homework. You can say, I'm trying to understand what our relationship has felt like for you. What needs of yours were not met? What feelings got hurt? What aspects of your personhood you felt were unseen by me? I want to understand what this has been like so that I can try to make up to you the ways in which I have hurt you. Now, some parents may have a hard time with this last part because they don't think they should apologize since the alienation was caused by the other parent. As you know, it's my belief that all parents hurt their children, and there's usually something to apologize for, but if it doesn't feel right for you, then don't include it. Now we're getting to the heart of the letter, figuratively and literally. In paragraphs 5, 6, and 7, you're going to take on a grievance of your child, explain the situation from the child's point of view, ask questions that show deep interest in the situation, and then end with a wish that somehow you had found a way to do something differently. Here's an example written from a hypothetical father to his son. I've been wondering if you're still upset about my being the one to end the marriage with your mother. You were just a young boy, just 6 years old when this happened. It must have been so confusing for you to go from living with mommy and daddy together in one home to going back and forth between two homes and having mommy and daddy not get along so well anymore. What was that like for you to know that I was the parent who chose to end the marriage? Did you feel that if I cared more about you, I would have made a different choice? Were there times when you felt particularly mad at me for making this decision? Were there times when the divorce was particularly hard for you? I want you to know that if I could do things differently, I would try harder to understand what it was like for you when the family changed, and I would work harder to make sure that you felt loved and safe, even though the family was going through such a big change. As you can see from the example, there's no attempt to explain anything from the adult's point of view. The whole focus is on trying to understand things from the child's perspective. There's another example. I've also been thinking about your being upset with me because you believe that I stole your college money. This is something that you've shared with me many times over the years, and I want you to know that I appreciate your letting me know what's been bothering you, and I always want to be available to hear your concerns. What was it like for you to think that I took your money? Did you believe that I demanded to take the money away from you in order to hurt you or spite you? It must have been very confusing for you to think that I would want to take something away from you. I hurt for you, knowing that you thought that your daddy would do that to you. I wish that I had done a better job explaining how the finances were divided after the marriage ended so that you could feel in your heart the truth that I love you and never want to deprive you of what is rightly yours. And here's one more example. I am also well aware that you're upset with me because I did not agree to buy a horse for you with Mommy. That was such a painful time for you when you thought that Juniper would be your horse, a dream come true, and then I had to be the one to tell you that it was not going to happen. That must have been a crushing blow for you to have something almost happen and then have it snatched away. I imagine that you thought about Juniper for a long time afterwards and felt upset with me for a long time. I wonder what you thought about my decision. Did it seem cruel to you? Did it seem to you that I was trying to hurt you and that I was selfish for not agreeing to buy a horse with your mother? I want you to know that more than anything, I wish that I'd had the money to buy Juniper for you, or that I'd been comfortable agreeing to buy a horse with your mother. I wish that I had been able to convey to you that my decision was not made lightly or out of any ill will for you or your mother. All right, I think you can get the idea that you're not trying to convince the child of anything. You're trying to create a feeling of closeness. So here's my mantra. Connect, don't correct. The minute you find yourself trying to change your child's mind or convince your child of the facts, you're on the wrong path. That's my opinion. When you're trying to show compassion and interest in your child's experience, that's when you're going to make headway in repairing the relationship. So that's paragraph 5, 6, and 7 of the letter. You take each one takes a grievance, looks at it from the child's point of view, asks a lot of questions that show deep interest, and then ends with a wish. And the wish can't be, I wish your other parent wasn't an alienator. It has to be, I wish that I had understood more about what you needed. I wish I'd been able to convey to you how much I love you. In paragraph 8, you want to invite your child to respond to your letter. You can say something like, I hope that you can see that I'm trying to understand our relationship from your point of view. I would love to hear from you about your thoughts and feelings about any of the issues I raised in the letter or anything else about our relationship that you would like to discuss with me. You could put your thoughts in writing, or perhaps we could talk on the phone, or even meet, maybe with a therapist. Anything that works for you would be wonderful for me. In paragraph 9, you're going to discuss the memory, which was the second piece of the homework assignment. I'm just going to give you an example, and hopefully you'll get what I'm talking about here. So you could say in the letter, and I'm just making up these facts from the hypothetical father and son. The other day I went to the riverbank by Valley Park and walked around the path. It looked and felt as magical as ever. I took many deep breaths of that special combination of earth and spring water and trees and fresh air that always made your heart sing. I have so many wonderful memories of taking walks with you there. In the spring, you were always so excited to see the water rushing by, so clear and clean. Do you remember climbing onto the big rock and just sitting there listening to and smelling the freshness of the waterfall? Those were such lovely times. You were always so brave and were up for any kind of nature adventure, and you were such a kind big brother, checking in to see how your little sister was doing. Nature seemed to bring out the best in you, and I always think of you when I'm surrounded by pine trees and sweet flowers and clear water. The point is to tell a story that features something positive about the child's character and uses as many sensory words as you can, especially sensory words that pertain to the sense of smell. The next paragraph is the discussion of the photograph that you found as the third piece of homework. And here's an example. I'm enclosing one of my favorite photos of you. You were just about 6 years old. Your first baby teeth just came out. You were so adorable. There you are snuggling with Fluffy, your first pet bunny. You were so careful and loving when you held Fluffy, so aware of how she was feeling, so concerned about keeping her warm and safe. Animals always brought out your best true self, as I can see when I look at this picture of you, overflowing with love and joy. I have a copy of this picture taped onto my fridge, and every time I go into the kitchen, I see your beautiful face and smile. It is essential to say this last part word for word. The picture should be on the fridge, not on the mantle or the nightstand or your desk. By telling your child that the photo is on the fridge, you're creating a sticky, symbolic connection such that when your child goes into his kitchen, he will think of you going into your kitchen thinking of him. Now it's time to end the letter. You need to have some declaration of your love and your deepest desire to repair the relationship. So here's an example. Aiden, my son, you are my precious child, and my heart is filled with love for you. I hope that you can see from this letter that I'm trying to see our relationship from your perspective. I would love to hear your thoughts about what I wrote about and any other things that are on your mind. I look forward to hearing from you and hope that this letter will be the beginning of a way forward. My arms are open, my door is open, my heart is open. Okay, and so now you are done with the letter. If you're planning on writing this letter on your own, please invite someone to read it. Ask that person whether the letter makes you sound resentful or angry or self-pitying. Does the letter sound authentic? Can you live with it and own what was said? It's important to stand behind everything you say. And finally, ask if the letter misses any big issues that would insult your child if you didn't mention them in the letter. Now you can ask yourself when and how to send the letter. The ideal timing is to send the letter when the child will not be with the favorite parent. If the child is about to head off to college or get a new home somewhere, wait until they're there. If the child lives with the favorite parent, send the letter during the time of day when they may be separated because of work schedules. I have no problem with emailing the letter. Make sure that the header says, I'm thinking about our relationship from your point of view. This is the most intriguing thing I can think of to hopefully get your kid to say, oh yeah, he thinks he knows my point of view? Let's see. And then you've got a kid reading the letter, which is what you want. Then you wait for the response, and of course you have to manage your expectations. The first thing I want to say is that there are 3 possible responses to the letter. No response, a negative angry response, and a positive response. The hardest, I think, is no response because you don't even know for sure if the letter was received or read. It can feel like a kind of torture to pour your heart out and work so hard on the letter only to have it feel like it went into a black hole. My only response is that I've certainly heard of cases of delayed responses, and I've also heard of situations in which the letter paved the way for some later warming. But more importantly, I believe that writing the letter has value for the parent even if there's no response or no immediate response from the child. But before you write the letter, you can ask yourself, how will I feel if I do this and I don't get a response? And if your answer is, I will be furious, I will be so depressed, it's going to really knock the wind out of me, then that might not be the time to send the letter because you don't know what your child's response will be. In my opinion, an angry response is a good response because, as we all know, the opposite of love is not hate but indifference. Any response other than, I will take out a restraining order if you contact me again, in my opinion, is a good step because it's the beginning of a dialogue. The negative response needs to be handled with tact, and I certainly recommend starting with appreciation for the child taking the time to respond at all, and of course, a positive response from the child to the letter is a great outcome. I just want to circle back for a moment. If there's no response, I suggest that you revert to ongoing texts and emails, and there's different types. There's one that I call the Happy Tuesday message. You're generally, you're just saying, hey, happy Tuesday. The sun is shining. I hope you have a great day. I'm thinking of you. Then you could also have a more pointed message. I love you and want to make things right. What do I do? What do I need to do to make things better between us? You could send a provocative message. You must be very hurt and angry with me, ... You could send a general invitation message. Want to get together sometime to talk or just hang out? Or a specific invitation. Want to catch the new blah, blah movie? Well, movie theaters aren't really open anymore, but if, want to take a walk, want to get together, want to have a phone call this weekend, today, tomorrow, whatever. If you do get a positive response, I suggest that you consider inviting your adult child to participate in the Restoring Family Connections program. The purpose of this program is to help parents and their adult children work through some of the landmines and awkwardness associated with beginning to repair the relationship. Ideally, the letter helps you start the conversation again, but then the program can help you really take the relationship past that initial stage. So this is an in-office program. It's not for severely alienated kids. It's not to be court-ordered. There has to be some willingness on the part of the adult alienated child to repair the relationship. So it's in the office. It has to be led by a licensed clinician. And in essence, there are 13 weeks of structured activities that help the parent and the child, the adult child, work on aspects of the relationship that are problematic given that there was alienation. So one of the activities is dealing with missed milestones. So if you didn't get to go to your child's prom or high school graduation or whatever, that could be an awkward topic. You don't know whether to bring it up because you might be resentful. The kid doesn't know whether to bring it up because he or she feels guilty. So you process all of that. And that's just one activity. So there's 13 activities. So I don't really want to do like a whole promo for the program, but you can feel free to be in touch with me if you want more information. And just to be clear, I don't offer the program myself. I just wrote the book, and you can buy the book and give it to a therapist who's willing to do the program with you and your adult child. So by my account, I have about 15 minutes left. And what I want to do, so I read the questions, and thank you, everybody who wrote in a question. And I feel like a lot of the questions, hopefully I answered through talking about how do I know if it's alienation or what do I do. But I want to give you one more very, very specific tool that I think will help for those people who write the letter and get a positive response or still have some contact. They're not completely cut off. So I call this tool, sorry that there's numbers and names for everything, but I call this tool the 5 steps. And it's really for a situation where your child or adult child has a complaint and brings that complaint to you. And I'll use the example of you stole my college money. So let's say you write the letter and then you end up like going out for coffee with your child and they bring it up again. You would be tempted to think to yourself, my kid believes X. In this case, the bad thing is stealing the college money. My kid believes X. It's a lie. If I can just explain that X is a lie, my kid won't be mad at me anymore. So I'm just going to tell them, you're wrong. That didn't happen. Why would you say that? Who told you to say that? You know I would never do that. So those phrases you should banish from your vocabulary. They never work. I've never heard of a situation where a kid says, I'm so mad at you, you stole my college money, or beat me when I was a baby, whatever the complaint is. And the parent says, why would you say that? You know I would never do that. And the kid says, oh, okay, now I'm not mad anymore. That does not work. What does work to some degree is what I call the 5 steps. Step 1, this is a paper and pencil thing. You guys should have paper and pencil and take this down. The first step is called gratitude. So you want to thank your child profusely for sharing their complaint with you. And the reason you want to thank your child is because, well, I'm going to tell a sort of a joke. I don't know if anybody will laugh, but the joke is, how do you know when a relationship is over? And the answer is when the other person stops complaining. Okay? So although we don't like it when our loved ones complain to us about things we're doing, It does mean that there's an investment in the relationship. You want your child to bring the complaints to you, and if you want them to do it, you have to make them feel good about doing it. And so the other sort of rhetorical question I'll ask you is, if your adult child has a complaint about you, who do you want them to bring that complaint to, you or the other parent? And presumably the answer is you, because, if your kid complains to the other parent about you, they're just going to fan the flames of your kid's discontent. So you want your child to bring complaints to you. I want to reframe a complaint as a gift. I want you to think about it when your child complains to you about you, to imagine it in a beautiful box with beautiful wrapping paper with a big bow on top, and you're really excited to get it. All right? So now you're going to express your gratitude to your child with at least 5 sentences packed with positive statements. So this is just, you don't have to say it word for word. I'm just going to give you an example. And let's say your child's name is Tim, and the complaint is, Tim thinks that you stole his college money. You would say, Tim, thank you so much for telling me that you think I stole your college money. I am so grateful that you're telling me what's bothering you. I cherish our relationship. I always want to know when something is on your mind. And you know what, Tim? It's easy to complain about somebody behind their back. It takes courage. So look me in the eye and tell me that you're upset with me. So I think you've been really brave, and I'm so proud of you. So step 1 is high energy, speaking with intentionality, and it's packed with words like cherish and gratitude and appreciation and courage and bravery and pride. So if nothing else, your kid should walk away thinking, wow, that went well. I'm going to do that again. The next time I have a complaint, I'm going to bring it to that parent. Step 2 is called compassion. This means paying attention in the moment to what your child is feeling. When your child, this hypothetical Tim, is looking and saying, I'm so something that you stole my college money, what is Tim feeling? Is he angry? I'm so angry that you stole my college money. Is he sad? You stole my college money. Is he disappointed in you? Is he scared? Is he frustrated? Is he worried? Is he hurt? And so I want you to pay attention to your child. What are they feeling in the moment? And there's 2 points I want to make about this. The first is, when we are attacked and we feel criticism as an attack, when we feel attacked, the part of our brain that feels compassion sort of shuts down and we go into fight or flight mode. And I've been thinking about this, like back, genetically, back, when we lived on the African plains, and if you're running from a lion who wants to eat you, you're not going to feel compassion for that lion. Oh, poor lion, what's he going to eat for dinner tonight? You're like, I'm getting out of here, right? So you're focused on, getting away. You're not thinking about compassionately about the thing, the person, the animal that's attacking you. So what you need to do once you go into the 5-step mode is take some deep breaths. It calms the central nervous system down. And that's part of the reason I want you to speak slowly with intention for step 1, because it will encourage you to take deep breaths. When you get to step 2, compassion, I want you to look at your child's facial expression, notice your child's body posture, and listen to your child's tone of voice, and make an educated guess as to what your child is feeling in the moment. And now I will role model it like step 1, high energy, speaking with intentionality, and it has to be at least 4 or 5 sentences. So you would say, no wonder you're so angry. You think I stole your college money, and I see that anger. I see it in the way you're standing. Your hands are in fists and your arms are across your chest like you're ready to do battle. I see that anger in your face, the way your jaw's set, and you've got a scowl on your face, and I hear it in your tone of voice. Everything about you is showing me how angry you are right now. Okay, so that's step 2. Just to be clear, both step 1 and step 2 intense, speaking with intentionality and energy, and 4 or 5 sentences. You can't just say, thanks, no wonder you're mad. It won't work. Step 3 is called empathy. That involves showing your child that you're trying to understand the situation from his or her point of view. So you might say, you know what, Tim? I'm just going to make up, some details here. If I were a 25-year-old young man, or I'm going to make it 18, it's easier. If I were an 18-year-old young man and I thought my mother stole my college money, I would be really mad too. I would be thinking, why are you doing that? How am I going to pay for college? Why would you do something like that? If I believed what you believe, Tim, I would be feeling what you're feeling. So to be clear, this is not an opportunity to wax poetic about your childhood or say, oh, you think you had it bad? When I was your age, my mother did blah, blah, blah. Or it's not about that. It's saying to your son or daughter or daughter-in-law, right, or son-in-law, if I believe what you believed, I would probably be feeling what you're feeling. Okay, now we get to step 4. Step 4 is called the minor correction. It's minor in 2 respects. First, low energy. So it's minor in terms of energy. Steps 1, 2, and 3, high energy. Step 4, dial it down. You're relaxed. It's almost after the fact, the way you're going to say it. And it's minor in terms of length. Steps 1, 2, and 3, long, 4 or 5 sentences each. Step 4 is 1 sentence. Here's different versions. If the accusation is objectively false, like you stole my college money and the money's still in the bank, you simply say, that didn't actually happen. That's it. You don't run and get the bank statement. You just, that didn't actually happen. That's it. Very casual. If the accusation is subjective, like you never listened to me, you can't tell your son or daughter-in-law, that's not true. That didn't happen. You don't know. You would say, I thought I was listening. That's your truth. If the accusation is you didn't love me, you can say, I know in my heart that I love you. It's 1 sentence to speak your truth, but not as if you're trying to convince them. Remember, it's connect, don't correct. You're telling your truth, but not with the intention to change your child's mind. And then step 5 is you just go back to compassion. So you would say, that didn't happen, that's step 4, but I understand that you believe that it did. And that's all that matters to me, is how upset you are. That's my concern. That's my focus. So you're telling your child, I care about your feelings. Now, if the accusation pertains to the future, not just the past, like you never listened to me, that pertains to the future because there's multiple ongoing future opportunities to listen to the child. You could say, I'm just going to role model 4 and 5, and then I'll tell you where I'm going. So 4 would be, I thought I was listening. 5 is, I hear you. You don't feel like I'm listening. And then you could say, could you tell me the next time you feel that I am not listening to you? I want to understand what those moments are, and we can look at it right then. Or I worked on a case just recently where the accusation was yelling. Now, the mother client didn't feel that she yelled, and she went through everything, and she said, so when she got to step 4, she said, I don't think I'm yelling, or I'm not aware that I'm yelling. Step 5, I understand that you feel that I am. And then she added the invitation. If you feel that I'm raising my voice, please let me know right then, and I will lower it. And there's 2 benefits to doing this invitation. The first is, if you really are yelling and you're not aware of it, you're going to fix the problem. And the second is, if you're not really yelling, the kid's not going to correct you, and maybe that experience will lead to a change in the child's perception of you. And I can say that you could also add to this, when your child has a complaint and you've gone through the 5 steps, and maybe there's an invitation you can tack on, try to remember what the issue is, try to be aware of it, and maybe about 2 weeks or whatever afterwards, you can then go back to your child, and this assumes you have some kind of ongoing relationship, and you can say, we've had several conversations lately. I remember that you felt that I raised my voice. I'm wondering if you've had that experience lately. Could you tell me, is this problem still an issue for you, or do you feel like, we've worked through that? And the benefit to that, by inviting criticism, is, again, you're sort of nipping the complaints in the bud rather than letting it fester. Maybe your child didn't think you were genuine when you invited him to tell you if you're yelling. So you're showing your child, I remember, I listened, this was a problem. Let's see how we're doing. And this is something that I think targeted parents in general have a hard time with, because you've been so maligned, you've been so misunderstood, so denigrated, so put down, that it seems crazy to invite criticism. Like, why would I want to bring more negativity onto me? But in my experience, it's sort of paradoxically helpful. You think it would be a problem by getting the kid to focus on the negative, but it feels like a good experience for the child to have the parent say, hey, I remember you were upset with me about something. How's it going? Is that still a problem? How can we make things better? That feeling of the parent caring is so healing. Even if the content is negative, I remember you say I yelled at you, that content is negative, but the feeling of connection is there. And that's what undoes the message that you're unsafe, unloving, and unavailable. And on that note, we are just 1 minute away from the end of the call. I know that there were many, many questions that were very specific. My child is X years of age, and I've tried this, and what should I try? I can certainly address some of those questions in coaching if anybody is interested, or hopefully the general information that I talked about will be helpful to you. So I'm going to hand the mic back to Elaine and say I hope this was helpful information.